Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into Nicholas Wright's Warhead to really get under the hood and understand the surprising neurological blueprint that actually drives human conflict. So the book kicks off with this really fascinating puzzle. I mean, think about it. We live in a world with instant food delivery and endless streaming shows, so why do our brains still react with this tribal split-second judgment, kind of like an ancestor spotting a lion in the grass? What is going on in there? Well, Wright argues that the answer isn't in some political treaty or a dusty history book. Nope. He says it's found deep within our evolutionary past, baked into the very wiring of our brains. So let's start right there with the war that's going on inside our own heads. Let's take a look at the ancient programming that, believe it or not, still governs so much of what we do every single day. Wright's central thesis, the big idea of the whole book, is that every single conflict, from a small argument with a family member to a massive global war, it's all born from these little simulations that are constantly running inside our skulls. And that brings us to the core concept of the entire book, this thing called the brain's internal survival model. So this idea of a model, it actually goes way back to a scientist named Kenneth Craik in 1943. And what it is, essentially, is an internal flight simulator inside your brain. It lets us run through countless what-if scenarios, trying to anticipate threats and opportunities before they even happen. And get this, it's not just a human thing. Check out this incredible example. This tiny single-celled organism, the dendrochamates, it lives on a shrimp scale. Its super simple internal model can actually predict when the shrimp is about to molt, which would be a death sentence for it. So in response, it literally transforms itself so it can find a new host. It's just a beautiful, simple case of survival through prediction. So, okay, if one tiny cell can have a model like that, what happens when you have 86 billion neurons all working together? Well, that simple survival mechanism becomes this vast, incredibly complex orchestra inside the human brain, an orchestra that is fully, and I mean fully, equipped for conflict. Wright takes us right into the heart of the Battle of Waterloo to show us how our most basic primal drives, the stuff governed by the lower parts of our brain, form the very bedrock of combat. I mean, facing cannon fire for 12 hours straight isn't just about courage. It's a story about the brain fighting a war against hunger, thirst, and that screaming instinct for sheer survival. And then there's the strategy of directly messing with brain chemistry. Just look at this number, 35 million. That's how many doses of Pervitin, which is a powerful methamphetamine, were given to German forces in just a 4-month span during 1940. And this just reveals a really harsh truth. You might get a temporary edge by altering brain chemistry, but the long-term price is absolutely devastating. Yeah, Pervitin kept soldiers awake in fighting, but it also led to terrible addiction, psychosis, and eventually total collapse. It's a stark reminder of how military power is directly tied to the brain's very delicate chemical balance. This brings us to perception and learning. During the Battle of Britain, the Royal Air Force was just massively outnumbered. Pilots, including a young Roald Dahl of all people, they couldn't rely on brute force. Their survival literally depended on their ability to rapidly build superior mental models of aerial combat. They had to learn and adapt faster than the enemy. Now, as we move up to the higher brain functions, we get to regions like the temporal cortex. This area is absolutely crucial for building our sense of self, our identity, our feeling of belonging to a group. It's what creates that powerful us, a motivator so strong that it can drive people to fight and even die for those they consider their own. So, let's climb to the highest level of complexity now, how our brains model other people's minds, turning the whole social world into this invisible battlefield of intentions and perceptions. This is where the uniquely human skill of mentalizing comes in, our ability to basically build a model of what we think is going on in someone else's head. This single capacity is the foundation for pretty much everything social: cooperation, alliances, but also deception and betrayal. Wright uses the stunningly fast fall of France in 1940 to show what happens when a whole nation's collective psychological model just completely collapses. It wasn't just a military defeat, it was a psychological implosion, where the very belief in the ability to resist just vanished. Now, in stark contrast to that, you have the Allied leaders, who painstakingly engineered a shared model of cooperation for D-Day. I love this story. Eisenhower famously reprimanded an officer not just for calling a colleague a son of a bitch, but for calling him a British son of a bitch. He understood that for the mission to succeed, their internal model had to be one of a single, unified force. So, if our brains are pretty much hardwired for conflict, where does that leave us? Are we just slaves to our own ancient programming? Well, the problem isn't really that our brains are flawed. It's more that their survival-grade programming can be a real mismatch for the modern challenges we face. You could say we're running ancient software on a very modern operating system. And this is where Wright draws a really vital distinction. Being clever is about that expert execution. It's about getting a plan done. But being wise, that's about having the integrated knowledge to see the whole picture, to step back and ask if we're even aiming for the right target in the first place. He compares this wisdom to an orchestra conductor. The orchestra can play on its own, sure, but a good conductor can make the difference between a brilliant performance and a poor one. They step back, they reflect, they sync everyone up, and they ask, what are we truly trying to achieve here? It's about seeing the whole performance, not just the individual notes. Ultimately, the message of Warhead is not one of despair. It's actually one of potential. Because by understanding the machinery in our own heads, we get the ability to start conducting our mental orchestra a little more wisely. Knowing the code is always the first step to rewriting it. And that leaves us with a final, vital question for the future. Now that we're starting to really understand our own blueprint, can we consciously decide to build something different with it?